Hi everyone, Ryan here. I'm the midlife skier, and as you may know, I've recently gotten back into skiing. I was out of skiing for about 15 to 20 years, so quite a long hiatus there. One of the first things in getting back into skiing is I noticed a few things have changed. And today I'm going to talk about some of the things I've noticed that have changed and some of the things that I've noticed haven't changed. The first most obvious thing that changed in my years since coming back to skiing is the usage of helmets. Back when I skied in the late 90s and the early 2000s, almost no one wore helmets, at least not where I skied. Maybe little kids learning to ski, maybe the occasional Olympic downhill skier on TV, but that was about it for helmet usage. Now, obviously, everyone wears helmets, or almost everyone. And luckily, before I recently got back into skiing, my brother, who he and his family had remained in skiing over the years, warned me that, hey, everyone wears helmets there. You need to get helmets for you and your whole family before you do it. So that was a big change. It kind of surprised me. Thinking about it, I don't think it's a change for the worse. I think it's probably a good idea, and it kind of, those of my generation, we think back to the 80s when almost no one wore seatbelts. When we rode bikes, we didn't wear helmets. It was just don't fall, don't get hurt. But now I think obviously those things happen, and having some protective gear, I think, is a real good idea. It didn't take much to sell me on helmets. The other thing I didn't realize about helmets that to me makes them much more desirable is they keep your head warm. They do a much better job for me than a toboggan used to, and they're pretty comfortable, and I just feel a lot safer in them. My brother actually had an incident he shared with me a few years ago where he was getting off a ski lift and the other person on the lift pushed off really hard to get off the chairlift. And the restraining bar that was up actually began to come down. And so as my brother got off, he didn't see the restraining bar coming down, and it clotheslined his head. And so he fell backwards, getting off the chairlift, and hit the back of his head on the ramp coming down off the chairlift. Um, Obviously, he was okay because he had his helmet, but his helmet was cracked. And so you can imagine, had he not been wearing a helmet, that would have gone a lot worse. So after hearing those stories, after him telling me, that, hey, that's how things are nowadays, I was very ready to jump on the helmet bandwagon. But still, it's definitely a big noticeable difference. The second thing I've noticed that's different is the prevalence of terrain parks at resorts now. Again, back in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, not every resort had terrain parks. In fact, I think most did not, maybe just the biggest ones. So that's kind of a new thing. I was slightly chagrined to see that one of our local resorts, West Virginia, about 4 hours away from where I'm at, there used to be on the side of the mountain a couple green slopes I really enjoyed. And when I look at the trail map now, I realize those are gone and have been replaced by terrain parks. So I'm slightly bummed about losing that. But on the other hand, I'm not bitter. I think terrain parks seem cool. Definitely not for me. I'm not going to be out there doing jumps or grinding rails. But for people that enjoy that, hey, have at it. So that's kind of a cool thing. I think that's new. That definitely very noticeable, very different. Twin tip skis, stuff like that, just that didn't exist back in the day. So that was kind of another eye-opening difference that you can see now. A third thing I've noticed that's different now is maybe a bit more subtle, is speaking of helmets, as I did earlier, I've noticed that goggles now seem to be a lot bigger. people wear these giant monster goggles that cover their whole face. Back in the day, goggles were goggles. They weren't super big, but they weren't small. But it's just kind of a funny thing. I think it's people look kind of funny now with their entire face covered by these giant goggles. But I get it. You get better visibility, better range of view. Perhaps it's more comfortable keeping more of your face warm in cold weather. So I get it. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump on that bandwagon, but hey, to each their own. But again, another very interesting difference between what I noticed back in the day and what I see now. Another big change I've noticed is tied to helmets, and it has to do with action cameras. Everyone seems to have action cameras on their helmets now. And certainly I intend to be one of them. I'm excited about it. But again, back in the day, there just weren't action cameras. There were camcorders. They were much bigger, much bulkier. And since no one wore helmets, you couldn't mount it to your helmet. So if you wanted to record skiing activities or a day out skiing, you had to hold it in your hand, which could be a little challenging if you're trying to hold poles. Obviously, lots of folks now also have selfie sticks that they use while they're skiing to record. But anyway, the rise of action cameras, that's definitely another noticeable thing that you just see a lot of out on the slopes. But back in the day, you didn't see that. People were just worried about skiing and trying to ski and have fun, and there was little or no recording or video recording of what was going on. So again, I can't say it's a bad thing because I intend to be joining in and doing it this season and looking forward to it. But it's again just a very noticeable difference for folks like me that are a little older. You know, as I say, I'm optimistically calling myself midlife. It's just different. A fifth kind of obvious thing that's really different now is smartphones. Back in the day, people did not have smartphones. They had maybe a flip phone or a candy bar phone, but they definitely did not have smartphones that could take video, that could do all the things that smartphones do nowadays. And this is a thing that, you know, again, I think it's kind of cool because the smartphone now, it's your lift ticket. At some resorts, it's your trail map. It's your music player, so you can listen to music with it. You can use it to track people in your party, so you can see where other folks in your ski group are located on the mountain, or even where you're located. That's one of the coolest things I've seen, where it'll superimpose your location on a ski map on your phone. That's real useful, real helpful for making sure you're not getting lost, not going down the wrong slope, perhaps a more advanced slope than you want to be going down. So I think that's a good thing. I haven't decided if not having paper maps is a good thing or not. Certainly seems like not having a paper map could get you into trouble. If, for example, your battery dies and you don't know your way around the mountain, that could be a bit of a problem. Hopefully there's good signage. But anyway, smartphones, another very obvious big difference between the ski experience now and back in the day. Another thing that's pretty different now, but in many ways it's also the same, it's kind of both, is the equipment. Skis, poles, boots, that all seems 99% the same to me. You know, certainly there are a few minor differences. Skis now have more shaping to them. Skis also seem to be wider in general now than they were back in the day. So wider skis are a little different. I guess, you know, that takes a bit of a learning curve, but again, they're wider for a reason. So I think that's, you know, when you get a good powder day, I think that can be much, much easier to deal with. We'll see. I'm hoping to find out firsthand. And in terms of the shaping of the skis, I think again, that's a great thing. It helps learning. It makes it easier to enjoy. So those are good things. And, another thing that is different is with the ski boots. While the boots to me generally look the same, yeah, there's some new BOA boots that are definitely, that's different. One big difference though with boots is grip walk. That seems like a pretty cool new thing to me that I've noticed. I remember back in the day wearing normal ski boots that definitely did not have any kind of grip walk, just a very smooth plastic bottom, trying to get up stairs at resorts or up little hills carrying your skis. I'm pretty sure I fell more in those boots than I did trying to learn to ski. So grip walk to me seems like a fantastic thing that it's one of those things again where you kind of scratch your head like, why didn't they have this earlier? Why didn't they have this back in the 90s and early 2000s? At least where I was. So that's another interesting, different thing that I think is a really positive upgrade. One final group of things that very obviously has changed since I've gotten back in the skiing, and I think a lot of people kind of talk about this, complain about it maybe, is the buildup of resorts. It just seems now like it's a lot harder to feel like you're in nature at these resorts than it used to. There's just more stuff. There's more buildings, more equipment, snowmaking stuff. There's just all this extra stuff now that seemed like it didn't quite used to be there, not quite as dense as it is. So that's a little bit of a negative for me. But on the other hand, progress is progress. Certainly a lot of these extra things that are there now are actually quite convenient, like snowmaking. You can get snowmaking where you didn't used to. You had to rely on natural snowfall. So that means you can get resorts open earlier. You can keep them open longer. And you have better certainty that there will be snow in most conditions during the season. So along with that, a final thing that I've noticed that's different that goes along, ties in with the resort are the accommodations. One thing that I think is a big upgrade is, again, back in the day, it seemed like in the late 90s, early 2000s, most of the resort accommodations right by the slope seemed like they were all built in the 1960s or 70s. They were very ratty, kind of old, nasty, smelled bad. You in general did not want to stay at those places. You wanted to be a bit off mountain. That's where the nicer places were. And so now clearly that seems generally very different in that the accommodations right on the slope are much nicer. And that to me is an upgrade. That's a much nicer thing. It's much more convenient. Now, going along with that though, on the flip side, the other thing that seems very different is all these super duper luxury accommodations and parts of resorts. That's another thing that it's not totally new, but again, it's more obvious now and it's definitely more dense now. And that's another thing that I think is maybe a bit of a negative, although I guess it doesn't bother me too much as long as it doesn't impede me from being able to go to the accommodations or the types of accommodations I would like to. But these super duper luxury destination resort type places, they do puzzle me a bit. That wasn't around except maybe in a couple key high end resorts back in the day, but now they seem to be everywhere. That's just kind of crazy to me, spending, $2,000, $4,000, $5,000 a night for these accommodations where they have spas and other stuff. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll have enough to where I can enjoy those and tell you if they're a good thing or not. But right now, they just seem like a bit of a head scratcher of why would people want to spend so much money on stuff that has nothing to do really with skiing in many cases. But again, that's my very biased opinion. Maybe I'll come around on that. Now, let's talk about a few things that haven't changed. I mentioned earlier about the equipment. I think in many ways the equipment seems generally the same, though I mentioned a few ways that it also seems different. Another thing to me that definitely did not change much at all is the ski rental experience. When I did that last season, it was exactly like I remember it being. It seems like in the ski rental shop, it always smells like foot, sweaty foot. I guess that just comes with the business, kind of that bowling alley used shoe smell. The other thing in the rental shop is it always seems like they're way too hot. You're just dying in there with your gear on, trying to get your gear on, get fitted, get set up for everything. And so that's another thing that to me just very much the same. Kind of funny that it's exactly how I remember it being. Again, the experience, the same kind of information, your height, your weight. And I get it. A lot of fundamental parts of skiing don't change. Therefore, for getting this rental equipment, it's not going to change. So anyway, it was kind of funny that the rental experience is identical. Another thing that really didn't seem to change at all is the way ski lifts and gondolas getting on them and off them work. That was great because that can be a tricky skill to learn, getting on and off, especially ski lifts. So getting back into skiing, that was a little stressful. Getting back on that learning curve, but having the lifts work the same, the gondolas work the same. Yeah, maybe they're a little wider now, a little faster at sometimes, but the general load unload process is the same. The restraining bars work the same. And that was kind of nice. That gave a feeling of familiarity as I got back into skiing with my family. So that's one other thing that didn't change. And of course, the final and most important thing that didn't change is the wonder and beauty of nature and skiing. Just the total enjoyability and fun that you can have while skiing. I talked in another video about why I got out of skiing and then what brought me back into it. But suffice it to say, the beauty and the fun was still there. And it makes me eager for this upcoming season to really dive back in and have a lot of fun. So I'm glad the fundamental of skiing hasn't changed, and I hope it never does. That's it for today. These are the weird things I've noticed that have changed in the 20 years since I've gotten back into skiing recently. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you agree with some of those things. Let me know if there's some things I forgot or didn't mention. Put that in the comments below. Thank you. Have a good day.